Where I come from, mister, there is no try. Spoilers for everything through Battleground, but today we're talking about Skin Game, and more specifically, we're talking about Team Angels. So we're talking about Uriel, we're talking a little bit about Michael, and we're also talking about Butters. Most of Michael's stuff makes sense in the context of other people, so I'm going to do another video on the Denarians, and I'm going to do another video about Team Dresden and Mab. I took copious amounts of notes on this book, and it made my head hurt, so that's why we're doing 3 different videos. In the first part of the story, Harry tapped Murphy to be his partner in Nicodemus's plot to rob Hades in the underworld. On page 299-ish of the paperback, Harry is talking to Murphy about how the first time he talks to Michael in years, he brings a lot of supernatural crap to his house. Murphy accuses him of having faith or implying that this might be part of a greater plan. Everyone thinks of this book as a heist story, but it's really, at least partially, about setting up the playing field to name a new Knight of the Cross and make a play at taking out some demons. Murphy stands up to Nicodemus with Fidelocius in a shoulder cannon she'd later use to take out an enemy in Battleground before Rudolph did the worst thing he could ever do. She falls for Nicodemus's ploy and ends up shattering Fidelocius, and all hope seems lost. But the handle ends up in the carpenter's yard for later. Nicodemus beats up Murphy enough that Michael comes out with Uriel's grace and ends up replacing her on Harry's adventure squad, and unknowingly aligning himself with Goodman Gray. Murphy's failure is really important for when Michael gets Uriel's grace. Being a knight has no room for error or free will on when to use the swords or under what circumstances. Murphy had very good intentions to do what she could to save Dresden, and they might come out of a genuine place of love for him, but the swords are not meant to strike down someone who is already surrendered, and Nicodemus was, for all sick and practical purposes in this moment, an innocent after he fake surrendered and asked for salvation. Nicodemus injures Murphy's left arm and leg. I'm no theologian, but I do know how to use Google. Ecclesiastes 10:2 states that a wise person's heart or mind directs them towards the right, where a fool's heart or mind directs them towards the left. And I bring this up because I noticed in the story that Nicodemus injures Murphy's left leg and left arm, specifically just on the left. And I think that this might be sort of a jab at her saying that she's foolish. I'm not gonna lie, the scene where time feels like it stands still and Michael comes out of his house offering to come out of the gate if Nicodemus lets his friends go was a lot for me. It reminded me of when Shiro sacrificed himself for Dresden earlier in the series. It's also kind of a reverse parallel to Grave Peril, where Dresden took Michael as his guest under the protection of guest rights, and then Susan showed up and did not have guest rights. Michael is now swapping places with Harry's love interest to get her under the protection of his property line and to come face danger in her place. Uriel's arrival also sets off some of my spidey senses. Dresden describes his power as coming from a star, which makes me wonder if there's some connection to the stars and stones. Could there be some cosmic blessing that comes with being starborn that we don't know about yet? He also tries to talk Michael out of coming out of the gate and leaving the protection, saying that he can't help him if he does. Michael sincerely thanks him and delivers the iconic line about not being the carpenter who set the standard. This makes me wonder if Uriel might have had a similar conversation with Jesus back in the day, around the time of the Last Supper or something. Obviously, Michael isn't Jesus, and his actions in The Warrior show that in very rare cases, he is not the perfect man that most of us think he is. I talk about this a lot in my other video about Father Forthill, but basically Michael beat the crap out of somebody who took his daughter. Kind of like the swearing scene. It's kind of nice to see Michael act like a human being for once. It just makes him feel more human to me. I feel like this wasn't a throwaway line and there has to be a specific reason for this conversation to have happened. Uriel offers Michael his grace at great risk. If Michael doesn't live up to the rules and standards like Murphy failed to do, then Uriel could become a fallen angel. No biggie. But Uriel takes that risk in order to save his soul. Later we find out that this could be the soul of Deidre or Nicodemus, which makes sense since the Knights of the Cross are supposed to try to save the Denarians, or fight them if that doesn't work out. In that order. And Uriel could have also known that there were other bearers of the coin that Dresden just hadn't figured out yet, namely Hannah Asher. But for now, what Uriel did is a big deal in the story, and it also is a little bit of a fan service move since we get Michael back. Some folks online wondered if Uriel giving up his grace to Michael and saying that he could fall means that this is foreshadowing him actually falling from grace later in the story. I don't think it is. If Uriel could decide to give Michael his grace without there being any consequences for it, then we'd get Michael back as a Knight of the Cross. We really need an in-story reason why this isn't possible in order for Michael to stay retired. Because honestly, I think that Michael wouldn't have chosen to retire if he was still able to be a Knight of the Cross. Uriel smiting that Denarian squire as a mortal when the squires attack the Carpenter household could also be a big problem, or it could not be a problem at all. As a mortal, Uriel doesn't have the same restrictions on him as he does when he has his grace. So he could be okay. However, the angels that protect Michael's home are supposed to only fight supernatural stuff that tries to hurt Michael and his family. So mortals are technically off limits. Angels and the Knights of the Cross don't really do shades of gray, so there might be some consequences for Uriel later on in the story. We just don't know yet. Uriel tells Michael that a soul is at risk, but we never get a straight answer on exactly whose soul Uriel is talking about. If we look at ulterior motives a bit, in addition to saving souls, there's also an opportunity to leave some Denarian coins in Hades' vault, which is probably a lot harder to break into than it is to try to retrieve the coins from the church and wherever they try to hide them. The coins have a really bad habit of going back into circulation, and Michael and Dresden even have a conversation about how they think that there's some sort of corruption in the church that leads to the Denarian coins going back into circulation when they really should be hidden. Uriel could have also wanted Michael to try to help save the souls of the squires and the other people involved in the heist. After all, Nicodemus was recruiting for Denarians when he asked Goodman Gray if he'd like to take up a coin. So it's only fair that the angels try to recruit too. And finally, for Uriel's motives, I think that another ulterior motive that he might have is getting the holy relics out of the vault. At the end of the story, Nicodemus has the Holy Grail, and Dresden has the shroud, the plaque, the knife, and the crown of thorns. I vaguely remember some of these being used in Battleground, but I need to finish my reread of the series in order to be sure. Uriel plays a super long game and is a very big picture guy, so the true extent of having these items probably hasn't been explained yet. He's also friends with Mab, and we all know that Mab had Harry do this for a reason, and it wasn't just to balance the scales with who owes who a favor. And we'll talk about that in the next video or two that I make. Now on to Sir Butters. Spoilers for everything through Battleground. I've been thinking a lot about Butters, how in Deadbeat he started out as this torpy little assistant to Harry that was more trouble than he was worth until he used the power of Polka to have the strength to win the day, to being a Knight of the Cross at the end of Skin Game. I feel like he's the antithesis of Rudolph because Rudolph's been kind of a pain in the neck. And Rudolph is a character who just can't handle the supernatural, like Jim Butcher has said that a lot. And that's sort of why he's in denial and acts like it doesn't exist and is really annoyed that other people believe in it. But Butters, on the other hand, Butters had a lot of trouble with all of the supernatural baddies, and you could tell that he was just scared out of his mind. But in the end, he rides the T-Rex, he helps save the day, and becomes more than just a one-book character, like he was originally intended to be. But at the beginning of Skin Game, his faith is tested again. He thinks that Harry might be transforming into something bad, because Harry is now the Winter Knight. He went bye-bye at the end of Changes, and then he comes back as a ghost, but then he goes back and hides away at Demon Reach, and there's just been a lot of stuff going on. The Fomor and other supernatural things are fighting for power in the space that was left over by the Red Court. And Butters has been put in a lot of positions where he's wanted to help people and he hasn't been able to do that, or he hasn't been able to do nearly as much as he wants to help save the day. This weighs down on his heart because he truly wants to help people, and even though it's scary, he keeps fighting for what's right. Guy's in his 30s or 40s, and he's riding around on a skateboard that is driven by Bob, of all people. Taking your life in your hands there. I guess if Murphy can ride a motorcycle, this is also considered responsible. But he tracks Harry down to freaking Nicodemus's hideout, his evil lair of evilness, and then he runs away and legitimately is scared of Harry and thinks that Harry's going to try to hurt him, which he doesn't, and Bob knows that, and that's why they're able to sort of work together to take out the ghouls and make it look like it's all Bob doing the damage, so that way Harry doesn't get in trouble with Mab. But I digress. Harry's given this opportunity to take Butters out, which is what he's technically supposed to do, so he goes Fazare all over it, gets him to, instead of going bye-bye, he goes into the carpenter's yard, which is protected. And we think that that's going to be the last we see of Butters, but we're really wrong. At the end of the book, Michael is injured and can't get back to the house in time. Harry knows that Nicodemus is going after his kids and his wife. And really, at one point, the only person available to save the day is Butters. Harry's starting to go into labor with Bonnie trying to get out of his head. Charity's been taken and is in extreme danger from Nicodemus. And Michael is too injured to be there at the moment. And Uriel, as always, is borderline useless, especially with the squires and their little pew-pew power. The scene where Butters decides to take Harry's jacket and go out and fight, even though he's certainly going to be defeated, is a true testament of faith. And I think that this is one of the main reasons why he ends up being a Knight of the Cross, because in that moment, the only thing that he had was the reassurance and that inner faith, or whatever you want to call it, that he was going to be able to make a difference that day. And he was willing to put it all on the line to go out there, try to save Charity, try to defeat Nicodemus. And if that doesn't sound like a Knight of the Cross, I don't know what does. And Harry has just enough strength left to throw the handle of Fidelocius to Charity, and then things work in mysterious ways, and a gust of wind puts it in Butters' hands. And then that thing becomes a lightsaber, with one of my favorite lines that I'm about to butcher because I don't have it in front of me. Where I come from, mister, there is no try. Do or do not, there is no try. Tell me to stop doing voices in the comments. Do you realize how much gumption it takes to go against somebody like Nicodemus willingly with like no sword training? Butters does. And it's a really beautiful moment because you finally have Butters in a position where he has the power to be able to do the good things that he wants to do for his community. And with Michael and Charity to help him get armored and trained and learning how to use that sword and stuff, he's going to be able to do a lot of good. And all this from a character that was pretty freaking useless all the way through Deadbeat. Like, he was really, really annoying for me to read the first time I read the series. But Butters has come a long way, and now he has a special place in my heart in the Dresden verse.